Hello, my name is Wes Estes, and I'm a real estate agent with RE/MAX Commonwealth. Today I have the good pleasure of talking with Mr. Reggie West with RW Stump Grinding. You'll want to stick around and hear what he has to say. So Reggie, tell me a little bit about yourself. How'd you end up getting into this profession you're in? A little bit of backstory on it.
Sure. Thanks for doing this, Wes. I appreciate it. So I came out of the corporate world. I had a corporate job up until about 4 years ago. I got into stump grinding, following in my dad's footsteps. He had a stump grinding business that he started back in 2003, 2004, kind of that time frame. I did do it part time for a couple of years back in that same time frame, and kind of let it go because life got in the way. I was busy, working the full-time job and trying to do this on the side. And it just, life got in the way and I let it go. But I always kept it in my mind that this would be plan B if my corporate gig ever went south. And finally got to the point where corporate life was not my style anymore, and time to branch out on my own. And luckily my wife of 24 years, Jen, was encouraging in taking that leap. Here we are almost 4 years later.
Wow, I was going to ask you, so how long you been doing this? So 4 years. So are you originally from the area, from this area, Chesterfield, or?
So I actually grew up in Williamsburg, which is about an hour east of here. And we moved to Chesterfield County in 2001 and moved to Chester in 2002, which is where we've been since then.
Gotcha. Okay. So, with stump grinding, take me through the process.
It happens a couple different ways. I do a lot of work for tree companies in the area, and they literally they send me an address and say, here, go grind 3 stumps, and I go find the address and go grind 3 stumps. A lot of homeowners call me direct. If they, a lot of folks like to take their own trees down, and once they do that, then they don't know what to do with the stump, and they call me in for that. A lot of folks, I see it a lot, they buy the houses with the stumps already there. So I do a lot of work for new homeowners that have just moved into a house. They've been in the house, 60 days, 6 months, a year, and finally the stumps reach the highest point on the priority list so they can finally start working on the yard or whatever they want to do.
So you bring up a good point. So you say the tree company calls you. Why doesn't the tree company just do it?
There's several reasons. I've got several theories behind this. Number one, it's a different mentality to grinding stumps than cutting trees down. It's a different skill set. And stump grinding is very methodical, very deliberate in how you do it. It's almost boring the way the machine works. The machine does all the work, and it just takes a different mentality. The other thing, it's the last piece of equipment that most tree companies acquire. They got to have the truck, the bucket truck, a chipper, a way to move the big wood and haul it all away. And by the time they get to that point, the stump grinder is the last thing. And most of them don't, go right to a machine like I have here that can take down any stump. A lot of times they start with a smaller machine, and that just kind of compounds the problem, because at the end of the day, you've been slinging logs all day long, you're tired, you're exhausted. Now you got to break out the stump grinder and sit there for an hour or 2 hours, when you really just want to load up and go home. So a lot of times it's easier for them to just call someone like me to come in and take the stumps out for them after the fact.
Right. I know I think I've heard or I've read somewhere like those machines, especially like the one you have behind you, they're not cheap, are they?
No, they're not. Brand new, the machine that I want right now, one day, hopefully brand new, goes, north of $80,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a serious investment. And when you get in a piece of equipment like that, you've got to have the volume to keep it running every single day, to make it pay for itself.
Now you said that thing can cut through any stump. What's the largest stump that you've had to cut through?
One of the biggest ones I did last year, the stump measured 7'6" across the top.
Wow.
And it was probably about 24 to 26 inches tall because the tree company didn't have a saw big enough to cut down any more of the stump. And when I measured it, so I cut the top off the stump, made one pass through and cut the top off, and measured it again, and it was 9'6". And then when I got down to ground level from where the roots came out on one side to where the roots went back in on the other side was about 11 feet.
Wow.
And that was a long grind. Even with a machine like this, it takes a lot of time. It's just so much volume of wood that you got to go through.
How long did it take?
Well, we kind of did it in stages because we hauled all the wood chips away. So I grind a little bit and we moved wood chips out of the way, and I grind a little bit more and we moved the wood chips out of the way. Overall, grinding it, hauling everything away, I mean, it probably took us 6 hours for one stump.
6 hours, man.
Yeah.
Now you bring up some, okay, so you actually grind and take away. Is that how you do yours? Or is it like, do you have like a process of, well, this is one, if we just grind it and leave it, this is a cost if we grind it and take it away. How does that work?
Yeah, no, you hit it exactly right. We have, 3 levels of service that we do. The base level is a grind. I call it a grind and go. Basically, I grind it up, and I don't touch the wood chips, and they stay there. The middle level, which is what I do most of the time, I call a grind and rake, where I grind it up, and we'll rake all the wood chips back in the hole and kind of smooth it down. And depending on the situation, we may run the stump grinder over it a few times and smash the wood chips down as much as we can. And then the highest level of service is to grind and haul everything away and leave the ground flat.
Okay, so three have 3 levels of service. Okay, that's great. So what is like the biggest surprise you've had? I mean, have you run into any craziness grinding stumps, or a surprise that like, oh wow, I didn't.
Well, not usually. The stump grinder is a very destructive machine. So anything that's in there or under the stump is, destroyed in the process. But I find rocks under there, you'd be amazed at how high up the rocks will go inside the stump from where the tree grew over top of it, or the ground somehow pushed it up into the stump. Especially in the city, I start running into chain link fence. The trees will grow around the chain link fence, or they'll grow around the fence post. I did find there was one stump I did a couple years ago. There was some formed metal piece that was just underneath this 24-inch oak stump. So it had to have been there for 50, 60, 80 years. And I still don't know what it was, but it looked like it's probably a part off of some tractor that just got left in the field, and this tree grew over top of it. But it was, when you hit, as you're grinding along, it's got a certain sound that it makes. And when you hear something different from that sound, your ears perk up. And I heard this sound. I'm like, I've never heard this sound before. And so I eventually worked it all out, and it's just this randomly formed part that looks like it probably came off of an old car or a tractor or something.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's 60, 70 years ago. That's interesting. Yeah. So with your stump grinding, how do you better yourself? How do you learn or continue to get better at what you do? I mean, what are some things that you kind of focus on or do to help that?
Right. So on the education side, I'm members of 2 trade organizations. One is TCIA, the Tree Care Industry Association, and they're all about safety in tree work, which stump grinding falls underneath of. It's primarily related to climbing and saw safety and stuff like that, for the big tree companies. But there is some information to be gleaned off of that to learn to be safe. I do things differently than I did in the past based on what I read there, the information that they put out. I always joke around that there's 3 truths about being in the tree industry. Everything is heavy, everything is expensive, and everything will kill you. And so I try not to let any of those affect me. But I tell people, again, jokingly all the time, I said, if you can deal with all three of those, then you might be successful in the tree business.
Had some work done in my house and seeing these guys shimmy up a tree and they're way up there and cutting with chainsaws. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some risk, I would imagine, every day going out on the
Yeah,
job.
yeah, there is, and it takes a unique person to do that job, and it's not for everybody. And I have no desire to climb trees. That part of my life is way in the past.
So when you began your career, I mean, what's the one thing maybe you wish you'd have known like before you got started into what you're doing now? Is there anything, if you reflect back, that you're like, man, I wish I'd have.
Well, a couple things. I said I did this part time back in 2003, 2004. I wish I'd had the foresight and the will, the risk tolerance to go at it full time at that point, because I would be 17 years into my business at this point, as opposed to 4 years into my business. So I kind of wish I had started, and I had, pencil scratched some numbers on how to make it work. And in my short-sightedness 17 years ago, the numbers didn't work out. So I never went down that path. But the best piece of advice I got was from my brother-in-law. So my dad ran his business up until he passed in 2011. And my mother sold his business to my brother-in-law. So it stayed in the family. And when I called him up, I said, hey, I'm going to start doing this. I think I'm going to get a small machine and just work my way up. And he said, don't do it. He said, if you don't get a big machine, you will regret it every single day. And he's 100% right. I could not imagine trying to do what I'm doing right now. I certainly couldn't do the volume I'm doing right now with a machine smaller than what I've got.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a big machine behind you there. Now you don't ride the thing, right? I mean, you're not getting up on that thing riding it, or like you see in the construction. You
No,
do like a remote control, almost like a game you're playing. I won't call it a game, but you know what I'm
right.
saying with a remote.
No, it's definitely not right on. And I did upgrade to the remote control after doing this for a year. It's got a control station on it that you have to stand on or stand beside to control the actions of the machine. And they're good, they work, but having the remote control allows me to stand on the right side of the machine, stand on the left side, stand in front of it, where I can get a better view of what I'm grinding, and more importantly, watch out for things that I shouldn't grind.
Right. Exactly. Being a stump grinder, I mean, what's one of the best compliments you ever received?
So I had this will stay with me forever. I had an epiphany in my first year doing this, and I came out of the corporate world. I was institutionalized, for lack of a better word, in the corporate way of things. And you never, or I won't say never, you rarely get complimented for good work when you're in the corporate world. You just, if you do a great job, great, go do it again. That's just all you get. But if you do something wrong, you're going to hear about it. So I did a job for a customer. It's just one stump, and I talked him through it, said this is what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. Called Miss Utility, got everything marked, went out there, did the job, and when I was done, he's like, "Thank you. I'm so glad I called you." And on the drive home, I thought about it, and I'm like, that it felt so good. Like that one compliment in my first year made it seem all worthwhile. As I was thinking about it, I was like, that felt awesome. And as I was trying to deconstruct everything, I'm like, I controlled every aspect of that interaction. I took the initial phone call, I went out there, met the customer, gave the estimate, scheduled it, came back, did the work, and gave them a product that they felt happy about, so happy that they told me, I am so glad I called you. I'm like, wow, that was it sort of, like I said, solidified my thinking that this was the right thing. I made the right decision to do this.
That's nice. That's nice. Hey, let me ask you this. So reflecting back 4 years ago, your first stump. Were your knees like knocking? Were you nervous? Like, oh my God, what if this thing, I mean, this thing runs
So,
down the road or something, or, I mess up and grinds,
well, there's definitely, anytime you're using a large machine like this that has the destructive capability that it has, there's always a learning curve to it. And I told people early on, I say, look, I'm going to look like a baby giraffe learning to walk on this thing, but I'm going to be super careful, and I'm going to do it right, and nothing's going to get damaged. And I was pretty successful in doing that, but it's I've let a few people, in the last year and a half, I've had a few employees, and I've let them grind. And again, like you said before, everybody sees me standing there with a remote control, and as soon as they get the controls, they're like, "Oh my God, you make this look so easy." And I tell them, I was like, "Look, that's 3.5 years of practice that I've been doing this, and it's every stump is different, every pile of chips is different. You're always adjusting." And I think what a lot of folks don't realize, a lot of the tree guys don't realize, is that it's all up here. It's really a thinking person's uh, job, because you're always worrying about what am I grinding, and what am I trying to avoid, and are there cars coming nearby, is there wood chips flying up towards the house, there's somebody walking up behind you. There's just it's very cerebral to run a stump grinder.
I bet. I can't even imagine. So what's your territory? I mean, where do you go? How far? What are your boundaries you cover?
So I'm based out of Chester, and I cover all the way north up to Ashland, down to I guess Carson, South Dinwiddie, north south. I go all the way out to western Powhatan and east out to Providence Forge. That's kind of my sweet spot, and for the right opportunity, I'll go further.
Okay. So the number that's on the screen beside you, is that the best way to get a hold of you, or yeah?
Yep, that's the best number right there, 804-366-4321.
Awesome. Okay. And you what's your email address, Reggie?
Email address is reggie.west@rwstump.com.
Got it. I love that logo, by the way.
The little happy axe guy.
Yeah, the little happy axe. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, Reggie,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, I found that logo for my dad's company when he started back in 2003.
Wow, that's cool.
And when I was doing it part-time, I used it as mine, and then kind of kept it. So now, as far as I know, my brother-in-law and I are the only two that are using that logo. He still uses that same logo as well.
I'll have to get a t-shirt with that on it. That's a cool logo. Well, Reggie, hey man, I appreciate your time today, and I mean, some valuable insight and information into what you're doing. And anybody needs their stumps grinded, this is the man to reach out to. Thanks again, Reggie.
Thank you, Wes. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.